Welcome to the FASERIP podcast. I'm Vince, and this week I'm sitting down with the creator of FASERIP Tactics, Sean. Hey, Sean, how you doing this week?
Hey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Awesome. So this week we're going to talk a little about FASERIP Tactics. This is a little bit different from what we're used to. Normally we talk about FASERIP the game, the RPG itself, but this is really related to it. Now, I know you're saying tactics. That sounds like a mini game or something. Technically, yeah, it is a mini game, and yeah, technically you can use FASERIP as it is, as a mini game. But no, you got to look at this for a second. Just step back and let Sean talk a little bit about this. But first, let's talk about Sean himself. Sean, tell us a little bit about your gaming background, how long you've been gaming for, your first game you played, things like that.
Yeah, sure. So I'm 42. I grew up in New York, and I'm definitely a comic book child first before an RPG gamer. So I had the fortune of growing up next door to the vice president of DC Comics, Joe Orlando,
Oh, wow.
also creator of Cain and Abel, a few other DC classics. Well, as a kid, again, I was fortunate enough that his son didn't like comic books, having grown up around a famous comic icon father. So I got free, what they call complimentary copies of all the Marvel books. So back in the day, all the executives from DC would receive complimentary copies of every Marvel comic book every week, and vice versa. Marvel would send complimentary copies of their books to all the DC executives. And this was just to make sure that all the execs from both companies understood, the storylines, and nobody was copying each other too badly. Well, when DC got the books from Marvel, Marvel stamped on the covers with a giant red stamp complimentary copy. So the books themselves, monetarily, of course, were worthless, but for a kid like me growing up, they were gold. It just meant that I got to read all the Marvel comic books I could ever want. So my first love is Marvel Comics, mid-'80s, early '80s, and that's what I grew up on. And then, of course, probably like you and a lot of your listeners, that led me into gaming stores, comic stores, to find more and more to read. And inevitably, I stumbled on TSR's Marvel Superheroes RPG, the original basic box set.
Oh, awesome. So, wow, that must be amazing living next to the vice president there, getting all those free complimentary comics. I mean, what about collecting? Just about you can read such a variety of different comics there. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, they were all Marvel, which was ironic. Had I been neighbors with a Marvel exec, I would have gotten all the DC comics. I probably love DC.
That is kind of funny. You're right. So, tell us how you came up with the concept of FASERIP Tactics. Now, everybody knows you can use FASERIP itself as a minis game alongside while playing. So, what made you say, hey, we need a different type of tactical game, but yet the same in a sense?
Yeah, so I think FASERIP as a rule set it has a lot of abstractions, and those work well in the RPG because you don't want to waste time measuring out the number of inches that Quicksilver can move. So it uses some high-level abstractions just to keep the game moving. So we have, like, in the RPG, for example, we use areas. And anyone who's looked at a FASERIP map out of the box knows that the areas are an abstraction, right? They're not exact. They're not squares. They're not hexes. Additionally, the RPG, it provides a way for us to resolve actions, but it's not really set up from the ground up to have attainable goals that you can do in, let's say, 40 minutes with a friend.
No, yeah.
And if you look at most tactical games or miniatures games, they're mostly for you and me or several friends to sit down and play a complete game in under an hour, right?
Yeah.
So those were some of the design goals that we had set out for with FASERIP Tactics. But we wanted to retain the spirit of the Marvel Superheroes RPG rules, right? So retain the spirit of the rules, be faithful to the source material, and encourage gameplay that really feels like a Marvel comic, but at the same time try to create a deep tactical game that uses that one core repeatable mechanic that most of your listeners are familiar, and that's the feat. And the last design goal was, and this is just to differentiate it from some other superhero miniatures games, was enable multiple ways to win the game. And we found that in playing other games like WizKids HeroClix, Knight Models, Marvel/Batman, they essentially revolved around just being able to destroy your opponent's forces. And so for a war game like Warhammer, let's say, or something like that, that makes a lot of sense. But having read a lot of comic books in my life, I knew that a lot of times that the issue is won or the plot is advanced by doing something nefarious, by capturing, an infinity gem,
Yeah.
or finding the ultimate nullifier. So I wanted the game to allow for figures who weren't just beat 'em ups to use their guile, to use their skills to somehow win the game. So we baked in a mechanic into the game that allows you to essentially win a game without ever knocking out an opposing figure.
All right, so let's get into the game itself, and I'll provide a link for those listening to the show or watching on YouTube in the notes of where you can download it. It's absolutely free. There's no charge for this rule set. You can download it and play it as much as you want. I wouldn't suggest modifying it unless speaking to you, because you might break something. Is it modifiable house rule wise? Or
yeah, I would say it's meant to be complex and deep, but feel free to remove mechanics that you don't like. One of the things we're developing for Gen Con is a quick start guide. So look for that in the next few days before Gen Con. And that'll allow you to kind of, if you know a little bit about FASERIP, to get started and play a quick sample game, and then build on that with the more complicated rules. And I'm sure, as somebody who's run a lot of FASERIP, you've removed rules from FASERIP at times. You've gone full whole hog at times. So yeah, definitely feel free to toy with the rules, play with the rules, and always provide feedback, positive or negative. We'd love to hear from you. Yeah.
Now, before we jump into things, you have the rule of 10 in your game. So you're basically taking all the statistics that we know for the game, the stats and everything, and dividing it by 10 and rounding it down, I believe, right?
Right.
Yeah, I'm looking at that.
Yeah, so just from a bookkeeping perspective, one of the things you get into with a minis game, and again, we're trying to finish in 40 minutes, is we try to simplify things so that you could, let's say, track your figure's health with a die or with some beads. So in order to do that, we simplified the math in the game. So we're using sort of a rule of thumb called the rule of 10. So when you hear things like damage and anything you would know as a rank in FASERIP, so excellent translates to 2, remarkable to 3, incredible to 4, amazing to 5, and then monstrous actually rounds down to 7. And this is actually for game balance purposes, but we also have the challenge of creating figures for the miniatures game that are balanced, right? And as we all know from FASERIP, there doesn't need to be an inherent game balance in FASERIP the RPG. Colossus just is who Colossus is.
Yeah.
And we know that if he goes and fights Nick Fury hand to hand, he's going to mop the floor with him, right?
Yeah.
If they're sitting there in a bunker together, right? But let's just say, for the sake of argument, we wanted both of those two figures to be represented at the same level in a miniatures game. We have to figure out a way to balance those two figures such that Nick Fury's value in a tactical game is the same as Colossus's value in a tactical game. And that was one of the toughest design challenges we had. But part of that was simplifying the figures and providing an easy to use and easy to track and bookkeep game, right?
Okay, so when you actually get into the meat of the game and start playing, you have the issue, which basically consists of the entire game in itself, which holds the pages, which is basically the equivalent of rounds or turns.
Very much like rounds. Yep. So the gameplay starts with you and me deciding to play an issue. And again, I'm trying to keep the comic vernacular alive here.
Mm-hmm.
You and I essentially will then take pages. The game will progress in pages, just like a comic book. And in a page, you and I take turns taking panels, much like you would have in a comic book. Typically, a comic book has 3 or 4 panels, and then you move on to the next page. And inside each of these panels that you and I are taking turns playing, we will activate some of our figures. And FASERIP Tactics has taken a very simple, streamlined approach to creating teams. So some miniatures games try to use what are called point-costed figures. So that would be, 100 points, and then you fill it with as many figures as fit in 100 points, and a given figure could be 5 points or 50 points or 80 points. That has its merits, but again, we want to be a quick play, pick some figures up out of a box or from our website and then out of your box, be able to quickly assemble a team. So one of the key things that we had to do in FASERIP Tactics, and again, this is a departure from the RPG, is classify the figures according to a power level. And that power level is called renown in HeroClix. And it's an important concept because it's how you and me can ensure that we are each going to build a team that has a relative similar power level. And in renown, in terms of the RPG, you know sort of off the cuff how figures fit in the hierarchy of Marvel, right? We just decided to classify it and use it as a way to build teams. So, for example, the lowest level of renown is called minion, and a minion is everything you would think it would be: a shield agent, a moloid, a Hydra agent, sort of the nameless ranks, right?
The mooks, yeah.
The mooks, yes. The next level up is bold, and bold figures certainly have a contribution to make to the heroic world, but they're just starting out their career, or they're just influencing a locality or a sphere that's very small. So some examples of some bold figures would be like Dagger, or Mysterio, or even somebody who's powerful but really has never been a leader. So take like Pyro, for example.
Right, yeah.
So those are bold. The next level up is heroic. Heroic is the meat of the Marvel universe. That's your Spider-Man, your Wolverine, Sabretooth, Cyclops, Dr. Octopus. These figures, they're important to what's happening in the Marvel universe. They shift the balance of larger events. They either lead small teams or they're an important part of a larger team, right? And then the next level up is called legendary. And legendary is heroes and villains that can affect the balance of this planet, right? So Doctor Strange is legendary, Professor X, Submariner, Magneto, the Hulk. So this very broad category-based system is the way for us to put these figures in buckets, right? And then allow you to choose figures and then come up with what we call a level or a game level.
Okay.
And the game level essentially says, very simple, we have a fun name for it. So, for example, there's a game level called Mean Streets. And Mean Streets has a roster, and the roster is simple. You pick 1 heroic, 3 bold, and 2 minion. That's pretty much it. You don't have to count points. You don't have to add a bunch of figures. It also kind of prevents you from min-maxing a lot, which some of the point-based games can get into, where you try to squeeze that last 5 points out of a particular game level. So we try to keep it simple, and then you and I would both build a Mean Streets team, right? And then we would go ahead and play. And in order to keep the comic accuracy as high as possible, we put some constraints around your team. The most important one is that when you choose to build a team, you have to choose a side, either good or evil. So we're talking about, classic Marvel here. There are good guys, there are evil guys and girls. And the figure pool itself, all figures are either good or evil, or what we call enigmatic. Enigmatic figures can be on a good team or on an evil team. And I'll bet off the top of your head you can name 3 or 4 enigmatic figures. Punisher, right? Is he good? Is he evil, right? Ghost Rider, right? The Hulk, right? So those figures fall into that bucket.
Yeah, and so the hope is we'll be able to eat teams, sit down, and like I said, finish a game in about 40 minutes.
Awesome. So I see you had actually have your own little cards, which they're called foils in your game, correct?
Yeah, folios are sort of the heart.
Sorry.
Yeah, folios are the heart of the characters and the figures in Marvel. So every figure that you would play with, you can go to our website, print the folio out, or just browse them, and it'll give you all the information that you need to, to learn about the figure and to play it. And like a lot of games, FASERIP Tactics is exception-based, right? So the rules say you can do something, and this is the way punching works. But the folio is the exception to the rule, so the figure will always override the core rules, right? So to give you a quick example, we have the concept of elevation in the game. So elevation represents, let's say, a building. And by default, a figure can't just walk up a building. But if you were to look at the very first figure in the very first set, and that's Spider-Man, Friendly Neighborhood, he has a power called Wall Crawler. Wall Crawler reads, ignores difficult terrain and elevation changes for the purposes of movement. So that lets us represent Spider-Man in all of his wall crawling glory. He ignores elevation changes and can just move up the side of a building, right?
Right.
So exception-based rules.
I see. That's how it override the actual rules itself. Right. I got it.
Yep. Yeah, and the idea behind the folios is when you assemble your team, so we talked earlier about mean streets. Mean streets, we would select 1 heroic and 3 bolds and 1 minion. So for the sake of argument, let's just say I wanted to play a good team, and I love Spider-Man. So Spider-Man's renown is heroic, and I would choose him as my heroic figure. And I would choose 3 bold figures. Let's just say for the sake of argument, I was interested in playing Cloak and Dagger. They're both bold. I would choose Cloak, Dagger, and then I'm going to go ahead and pick another bold figure to round out my team. And let's just say I wanted to pair Spider-Man with his sometime love interest, the Black Cat. She's also bold, so I would choose Black Cat. And then finally, I would need a minion figure, so I would choose a police. And that would round out my team. Not all of them are good. For example, Black Cat is enigmatic. But because the enigmatic figures can be used on either team, that would be, our complete roster. Mm-hmm.
All right. So I see you have an example of gameplay here on page 20. Which,
yeah.
Can you take me kind of through how the whole process works of gameplay compared to regular FASERIP? So you said it can be done in 40 minutes, and I thought it was interesting how you use tokens, which I want you to explain to everybody out there. It was really cool how you did it.
Yeah, so a few things we share in common. One is the concept of initiative, right? And that's just a way for us to figure out essentially who goes first. So in the gameplay example in the rules, you'll see two teams. In this case, it's a Marvel Knights team, Marvel Knights theme team, and then the evil team is Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. In addition to choosing figures, we also have to choose what's called a plot. So each team has a plot, and this is an overriding goal, and in game terms, it's a tactical objective that's physically laid out on the map. So, for example, Marvel Knights has a plot called Kitchen Cleaners. I also forgot to mention, most figures have what's called a team affiliation,
right? And
having a team affiliation confers benefits with other teammates, much as it does in the comic books. And there's some details in the rules about all of these benefits, but the idea was we wanted to have the rules really incentivize you to keep a thematic team together. So in this case, Marvel Knights and then Brotherhood are used in the example. So additionally, when you choose a plot, each team affiliation has a plot that confers to them some kind of an extra bonus. So in this case, we chose Kitchen Cleaners as the Marvel Knights plot, and we chose Mutant Massacre as the Brotherhood plot. So the gameplay basically works as we roll initiative, and again, also you can play this entire game with just a set of D10. That was another design goal, that you didn't need a whole bunch of extra dice, right? So we would go ahead and roll initiative, and the winner of initiative gets to choose which side of the map to place his figures. So one player places his figures as objects and his opponent's plots, and then the other player does that in kind. And then the game actually begins, and as you said before, the game, which we call an issue, is broken down into pages, and pages are akin to rounds in other miniatures games. So at the start of the first page, we're going to roll initiative again. In the example, well, let's just say for the sake of argument, I'm playing the Brotherhood team. I have Mystique on my team, and Mystique is a heroic, and she has a special power called Behind the Scenes, gives you +10 to your initiative rolls. So in FASERIP, the initiative roll is a D100 roll. Whoever rolls highest can then choose to either go first, in other words, take the first panel, or defer. So early in the game, sometimes it's better to defer because I want to see what you're going to do first before I decide to move my figures. So I defer to you. You activate one ready figure, in this case, let's say Iron Fist, and then you move him using move actions, which are detailed in the rules, and you end up in a square of terrain somewhere. That panel then ends, and you pass the next panel back to me. Now I take 2 figures and activate them both. So in this case, I activate Mystique, and then I activate Pyro. They're marked as tired using tokens, and the game itself, we actually have a line of tokens. I don't know how well they'll show up on the camera, but We have little tire tokens to represent tired. We have tokens to represent karma use.
You had those custom made,
because you can spend karma once an activation. It's an easy way of tracking figures. And then you may be familiar, of course, with conditions in FASERIP. So stunned is a popular one. So we have tokens for representing, figure being stunned, and so you can easily slide these next to the figures on the map. So we go back and forth until all of us have activated all of our figures, and they are all marked as tired. And at that point, the page ends, and then we begin a new page. We clear all the tired tokens off of figures, and then we roll initiative again, and then we start the whole cycle over. And each of these complete activations of all of our figures represents a page. And typically, games last anywhere from 6 to 7 pages, depending on the size of the game. The more figures that you have, the higher the bar is for winning. And winning in FASERIP Tactics is done through a currency we call victory points.
Right.
And there are 2 primary ways to obtain victory points. The first is by advancing your plot. And as I said, the plots are physically represented on the map by a token, which we also have tokens for. And it requires you to typically move a figure to that plot and then make a feat. And the plots themselves, they vary between feats you would consider to be physical feats and then feats that would be considered more reason-based. And this was a design challenge we had where we wanted the thinkers of the Marvel Universe to actually have a way to really impact the game outside of the bruisers. So if you take a look at our first set, Marvel Takes Manhattan, we have a few plots that require a reason feat. And a good example of that is alien technology is a feat, and it requires a reason feat. And if you get a white result, figure trying to advance it loses 1 health. If you get a green result on the universal table, you gain 1 victory point and you heal 1 damage, and so on and so forth. So we wanted the plots to cater to the different kinds of denizens of the Marvel Universe that you'll see. Not all of them involve, killing and blowing things up. Some of them allow the figures who uses their mind to contribute to the game. The other way that you can gain victory points is the good old-fashioned way, and that's time. Knocking a figure out. Yeah, knocking a figure out and reducing its health to 0 will KO it, and then you'll gain victory points according to that figure's renown, right? So knocking out a minion, for example, doesn't net you a ton of points, but knocking out Thor will net you a lot of points. And the amount of points required to win the game are set at the time when we define the game level. So I mentioned playing Mean Streets earlier. Mean Streets has a victory total of 12 points. And you'll notice that the number of points for victory is also equal to the total number of points of the figures on each team. So if by default I just knock out all of you guys, I win the game, but I could also score 12 victory points by advancing the plot 12 times and never touch any of your figures.
That's pretty neat how you can do that. Without clobbering someone, you can still get over it.
Right, and certain figures, and Marvel has a deep, rich history of heroes and villains subterfuge, who don't necessarily going around running out into the middle of the street and punching people, but they work more behind the scenes. So from our first set, Marvel Takes Manhattan, there are a few pretty good examples of figures who take this approach. Mystique is a classic example. Mystique has a power called Hidden Agenda, and it says, after successfully advancing a plot, she may take a move or attack action, use only once per page. Well, if you look at most of the plots, they mostly require an attack action. So effectively what Mystique can do is, if she wants, advance a plot, get a point, and then take an attack action and, let's say, shoot an opposing figure. Or she could advance a plot and then advance the plot again, making her a very threatening figure if she gets onto the plot and begins advancing it.
Oh, yeah. How well does the game lend to... I see this is like a head-to-head. What if you do 3 teams or 4 teams? Can you do something like 4 head-to-head to people, or does it adjust?
Yeah, so you can use the same framework of rules, only instead of you and me taking turns taking the panels, we might decide to go clockwise, and you would take a panel, and then another player, and another player, and another player. So that might work. We haven't tested it. I would also say that the map could get pretty crowded, depending on the size of the map you had. Yeah, but I think it's absolutely doable. And one of the things we want to do for Gen Con is try to introduce what we call scenario play, where you and me would bring a team and we would play against a third person running, let's say, something like Galactic. So the third person would use Galactus, which would essentially be the thing that you and I were both trying to defeat. So we're working on that.
I think it'd be kind of cool if you, one night your gaming group shows up and say only 3 people show up out of the group, and you're the GM. You're like, hey, why don't we play Tactics? You play, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. You play, the whomever, and you play the Avengers. Just something like that. It'd be kind of cool, and back and forth just to try to defeat. And then maybe the people who play the villains, they get an extra slew of bad guys compared to the other 2 players, or something like that.
Yeah, the other option would be you could split the team. So, for example, some of the large where you start to deal with a lot of figures. Take, for example, the crossover event. Crossover is a slightly higher level of battle.
Yeah.
In that game level, you choose 4 heroics and 2 legendaries. So if you think of that in comic terms, that's a pretty heavy-hitting team. Like, that's appropriate for like the Avengers, right?
Oh yeah.
For example, Captain America is a legendary, Iron Man is a legendary. And then you could have 4 heroics like Giant Man, Wonder Man. There's another, Hawkeye is a great example of Avengers heroic. And then you can team build Spider-Man in. And a lot of what we try to do with some of the figures and the teams, so just let me take a step back. FASERIP Tactics is delivered in sets, much like a classic minis game or like a HeroClix or a D&D minis. And what we want each set to have is we want each set to bring a new set of teams from some corner of the Marvel Universe, right? So the theme of the first set, which is called Marvel Takes Manhattan, is to sort of get the classic denizens of the New York area, right? So we chose a few different affiliations. We chose what we call Marvel Knights. We chose the Sinister Syndicate, and then we chose X-Men, and we chose Brotherhood as our 4 represented team affiliations. And so the whole set has a feel for a low-level street type fight, right?
Yeah.
The next set, we've released 3 sets so far. The second set was called Avengers Assemble, and Avengers Assemble has a slightly higher power level. The Avengers themselves, of course, have some more powerful members. So we had the Avengers, we had the Masters of Evil, we had S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra, and then we added a 5th team called Thunderbolts. And as you can expect, a lot of the Thunderbolts have ways to either be Avengers or be Masters of Evil, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the idea is that each set comes out with some primary teams, they're new teams, and then we reserve some of the last figures in each set to support the teams from the prior releases. So, for example, Avengers Assembled was the second set, but then we decided to give 2 more figures to each of the sets, each of the affiliations from the first set. So Marvel Knights got Moon Knight and Echo in the second set. Sinister Syndicate got the Green Goblin and Venom. The X-Men got Jean Grey and Shadowcat. And the Brotherhood got Avalanche and the Juggernaut.
Nice.
Yeah, another important distinction between the tactics rules and normal FASERIP is we made some alterations to the universal table. So in order to simplify the rules for the tactics purposes, we started using symbols that you can immediately recognize from your figure's folio and then quickly find on the universal table. So keep in mind that not everybody we introduced this game to actually has a background in Marvel superheroes, right? So there's some need to try to simplify and make them a little bit easier. And it's a deep rule set to begin with. So we use these icons to try to make things easier. So if you look at our version of the universal table, which is of course up on the website, you'll see some of the words replaced with symbols, like a fist for a brawling attack, a running guy for a charging attack, crossed arms for a grappling attack, and so on and so forth. Shooting attack is a bullseye. So we simplified things, streamlined it a little bit, but the same core mechanic of the ranks going left to right and your dice roll going top to bottom, all that's been retained.
I see you stopped at Shift Z.
Well, we may eventually at some point, move past Shift Z. But one of the things that you get into with a miniatures game is that the scale of superheroes starts to get out of control pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So, representing, for example, the Beyonder scenario probably will never make sense. That being said, our latest set, which focuses on the Fantastic Four, did introduce the highest level of playable figure renown, which is called Cosmic. So that's one level above Doc Strange, Submariner. And so we introduced a few Cosmic level characters in the latest release, which is called Reign of Doom. But to be honest with you, they are very high variance. They're fun to play, but their power level is so much higher than, your neighborhood Spider-Man that sometimes the results can be kind of brutal. So we introduced Thor as a cosmic character, Annihilus as another cosmic character, and then because we introduced the Defenders as a team in that set, we also introduced the Silver Surfer.
Yeah, wow. I see a lot of things you guys moved over. Awesome.
Yeah, we're trying, we want to make the characters that everybody knows and loves first, but there are so many characters in Marvel that we all know and love. It'll take a little bit of time, but what we wanted to do is with each set, ensure that at least the core teams that we're introducing are playable, right? So, for example, I can't release a set called Reign of Doom focused on Fantastic Four and Doctor Doom and not have the Fantastic Four be playable, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah. So our hope is that, you'll be able to make a theme accurate team based on whatever, comic book characters you like. There's also a lot of interesting ways to bring affiliations from one figure to another. A classic example of this is The Thing. If you've read comics regarding The Thing, you know that one thing The Thing loves is Poker Night. And he has a power called Poker Night, and it says at the start of the issue, choose up to 3 allied good figures. Those figures gain his team affiliations. So that's a way for The Thing to bring other good heroes onto the Fantastic Four with him.
Oh, that's
and we have
neat.
a lot of different powers like that. They're called team-building powers. And they give you some flexibility when you're designing your teams to make sure you could fill a specific weakness or really enact a comic-accurate moment. Example of that would be Black Cat from Marvel Takes Manhattan. She's an otherwise unaffiliated figure with no team affiliation, but she has 2 really cool special abilities. The first one is called Indebted, and it says at the start of the issue, she gains all of an allied Kingpin's team affiliations. But then she also has another special ability called Spider Crush, and it says at the start of the issue, she gains all of an allied Spider-Man's team affiliations. So we wanted to make sure that if you wanted to play Black Cat, you could represent both sides of her history in the comic book.
That's awesome, man. You took really put some major details into this. I'm happy about this. I did have one question about the condition tokens that you have. Do you have them on your website so people can download and print them, or?
What we can do, we order them from a vendor, and the actual order codes to order them from the vendor, I can certainly put in the Facebook group. But I don't ever want to really sell any of this stuff or anything like that.
No. I didn't mean sell. I just meant provide like a little thing. So for example, if someone listening is like, hey, I'm going to check this out, they download the rules document, they grab a whole bunch of Hero Click minis for now, which we'll get into a second, some of the things you've done. And they're like, well, now I need condition tokens like this guy said. What do I use? And you go to the website. I see the condition cards.
Right.
But I don't see...
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. That's a great idea. I'm happy to link. And for about 25, maybe $30, you can get a playable amount of all the little tokens you need to play the game. Now, of course, you can use potato chips and beads and whatever you have laying around. But the condition tokens definitely add a fun element
Oh yeah,
to the game.
Because for me personally, I would probably download, say like you had a PDF or something, and I would do like they've done many times with D&D things, is like the we used to call them pogs. I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
We would just take a water crap. I can't think of the word right now. Water, the round circle metal. Why can't I?
Yeah, punch out. Yeah.
And I would just kind of glue it to that thing so that I have a condition coin and I can slap it down.
Definitely. Yeah, it adds to it. I can tell you, playing the game with all the little condition markers, and they're all, it just looks more appealing to standard, people watching the game or whatever. They'll get interested just based on the fact that you have these funky looking, you knock somebody out, you put this onerous stun token next to them, So
yeah, it's a reminder token. I like the token idea. It's just you need to definitely put it on the website so we can download it or something, or
awesome.
Provide us a link. Yeah. Hey guys, you can go here and purchase it from these people. You get zero money from it. It's just all them, something like that, so people know.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great idea.
So people finding you at Gen Con, why don't you show people how they could find you at Gen Con, which you were just showing me before this podcast?
Yeah, so, if you happen to be running what we call the FASERIP Tactics Open, so if you go to Gen Con's event search page, you should be able to just type the word FASERIP that this podcast is named after, and that event should come up. There's also a couple of Marvel Superheroes RPG events going on at Gen Con. Over the last few years, the pickings have gotten very, very thin, and those sold out in about an hour. So if you didn't get into one of those events, but you still want to experience the fun of FASERIP and learn a new game, come out to our event, The Open. We're happy to also demo the game. We'll also be demoing the game likely in the Hyatt on Wednesday night and Thursday night. And while we're demoing the game...
This is what I was talking about, yep.
We will have the world's largest
universal table map. Would be on the wall or something, or on a peg or something?
Yeah, it'll be hanging out in the Hyatt. And so you can at least get a picture with the world's largest universal table. Yeah.
It's like 15 feet or something.
It's quite big.
That's awesome. So
we made that investment the first year. Yeah.
Find that. You will definitely find the game, and maybe you could slap down some generic tickets if you have some opening spots. People can join or something. And
definitely. And if you didn't bring any figures, not a problem. We'll have plenty of extra teams put together with the folios printed out. Usually what we do is we take, you can buy them at your Office Depot, but they're essentially plastic sheets where you'd put a piece of paper in, and then we print the whole team out on one sheet of paper, so you have all the folios and your plot. You put it in a plastic sleeve, and then you can use a dry erase marker to notate your team's health and karma. Mm-hmm.
What do you recommend folks using if they want to use minis? Now, you have your custom set of minis. People could use HeroClix. Can you show us something that you maybe used in the game? Or
yeah, sure. So I use mostly old HeroClix, but there are a few other lines out there. Hero Ape, for example, did a Marvel set. There's some good minis to be farmed out of that. You can get them pretty cheap on eBay. And then the other line, 28 to like 32 millimeter minis, was made by a company called Night Models. They did the Batman line of miniatures, and they briefly held the Marvel license, but they later lost it. And typically what I do is I just debase a HeroClix, and I put it on a standard 28 millimeter miniature base, which you can get from any company. Any miniature market sells these bases. They're about 10 cents. And that's only because the click base kind of irritates me. There's no reason to really take it off other than aesthetics. I've taken the time to take some of the classic HeroClix stuff and then modify it. So this is my Kang, for example, with his personal force field from the Avengers set. But yeah, if you really go to any of the miniature Cool Stuff Inc., Troll and Toad,
Reaper minis, definitely.
Yeah, you should be able to put together a team for under $5 if you just pick the common. Because at this point, it's 2018. I can tell you that Wolverine has been made in HeroClix north of 100 times now. You can find one you like and use him. But yeah, at Gen Con we'll have plenty of extra teams, and so you don't have to bring any materials.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us this week, and we'll hopefully hear maybe an update from you. If you can email us or maybe just pop over on our website, classicfaserip.com, and just give us a little comment on this when you come back from Gen Con, which is in 2 weeks at this point? Yeah.
Yeah, T-minus 2 weeks. I have a lot of preparation to do, and I haven't done a whole lot of it. So,
well, hopefully we'll get some more people asking you a bunch of questions to keep you from doing. No, I'm just kidding. But
yeah,
anyway,
I'm happy to answer any questions. Join our Facebook group.
Yeah, give us your contact information while we're at it.
Yeah, so you can list it in the show notes, but there's a FASERIP Tactics on Twitter, which I believe is just FASERIP T, and I believe we follow your Twitter account. So that's one way to contact us, and that has the link to our Facebook group, which in 2018 is the easiest way to sort of share stuff, be a forum, ask questions, and then. And then we have our core website, which has the rules and is always updated with folios. And it also has some handy ways to search by team affiliation, by trait. If you want to find all of the Midnight Suns, or if you want to find all the Skrulls or soldiers, there's a search feature there where it'll show you all the figures by a specific filter.
Awesome. Thank you for joining me this week, Sean. Hope you have a great week and start planning everything. And anybody have any questions, let us know here at the Classic FASERIP Podcast. Leave a comment below at YouTube. Leave a comment on our website where this podcast audio will be. If you want to see some of the pictures and you're listening to this, head right over to my YouTube channel, The Evil DM, and you can check out all the pictures and all the little figures that he has shown, and the giant universal 15-foot table that he had just showed us a second ago, which is amazing that you guys did that. That's definitely a piece that's going to be in the room that everyone's going to see from far and beyond. So
yeah, we hope so. Well, thank you, Vince. I appreciate it.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.